The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. A federal appeals court rules President Trump's tariff plan can continue for now. The legal battle ahead. Plus, supercharging deportations. The Trump administration sets a new goal for the number of illegal aliens it plans to arrest every day.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule.
And schedule scrub. The CDC changes its recommendations for the COVID vaccine. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We are glad you are here with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we start with the trade policy tug of war. The Trump administration getting a win as an appeals court allows its tariff plan to stay in place. The decision reversed an order from the U.S. Court of International Trade that sought to block the bulk of Trump's sweeping global tariffs. The three-judge panel claiming Trump had overstepped his authority. That's something the Justice Department denied, writing the judgment was rife with legal error by activist judges seeking to derail Trump's efforts to eliminate our exploding trade deficit. The National Economic Council director says he's pleased with the ruling.
President Trump's case is ironclad, and the appeals court took almost no time at all. In fact, we're surprised it took till the end of the day for them to overturn this previous ruling. The bottom line is that President Trump's trade team has their eyes on the horizon. They understand that we've got to make America great again by making trade deals fair, by advantaging U.S. producers and U.S. farmers when they sell things in foreign markets, and leveling the playing field at home for foreign products that are brought here.
The ruling is not the final word in this legal battle. The White House vows to continue its fight all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And developing right now, Russia ramping up its attacks on Ukraine and its rhetoric about President Trump, raising doubt about the future of peace negotiations to end its years-long war. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar reports from Washington on President Trump's latest comments about what he may do next.
Ukrainians reeling from a recent barrage of Russian attacks. No sign yet of a ceasefire, let alone the peace the White House is trying to produce.
We are calling for restraint and urge all parties to avoid further escalation.
President Trump and those closest to Russian President Vladimir Putin now engaged in a war of words.
The words speak pretty loud. We're not happy about that situation.
In a pair of recent social media posts, President Trump said Putin has gone absolutely crazy. And if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia, now a top security official, replied, "I only know of one really bad thing, World War III. I hope Trump understands this." And Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Trump was being emotional. Despite these words and Russia's escalated attacks on Ukraine in recent days, President Trump still undecided about whether Putin is serious about negotiating an end to the war.
We're going to find out whether or not he's tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently, but it'll take about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
In light of these latest attacks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is among those calling on the U.S. and Europe to impose additional sanctions on Russia. And we know it's something President Trump is considering, but here's what he just said about what's stopping him.
Only the fact that if I think I'm close to getting a deal, I don't want to screw it up by doing that.
In fact, Putin now wants Western leaders to lift sanctions and receive guarantees from NATO to stop expanding eastward, Reuters was first to report.
Well, that's what he wanted. One of the things that he wanted in the beginning was to dissolve NATO, because then he could continue his rant across Europe, taking territory.
For many in Congress, lifting sanctions is out of the question. There are bills with bipartisan support in both the House and Senate to impose hefty new sanctions on Russia, in limbo without the approval of the president. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller calling on the Department of Homeland Security to supercharge deportation efforts. Miller wants agents to arrest 3,000 illegal aliens per day, triple the target goal set in the early days of the administration.
and we can't take the risk of letting these Biden illegals roam around freely so that the next American daughter can get raped, the next American kid can get murdered, the next American family can get splintered and torn apart by people that came into this country unchecked, uncontrolled, unvetted, uninvited by the American people.
Meantime, another fight over deportations has landed on the doorstep of the Supreme Court. Trump administration officials say they should be able to send illegal aliens to countries where they are not from if their home countries won't accept them. The National News Desk, Christine Frizzell, reports.
This U.S. military base in Djibouti, Africa, just the latest front in President Trump's war on illegal immigration. It's where several men, all illegal immigrants convicted of serious crimes, are being held as a fight over where they can be sent next plays out. Their photos on display at a recent Homeland Security briefing.
No country on earth wanted to accept them because their crimes are so uniquely monstrous and barbaric. Murder, rape, child rape, rape of a mentally and physically handicapped victim.
The U.S. Supreme Court now asked to intervene after a federal judge in Boston blocked their deportations to South Sudan, where just one of the men is from. The judge accusing Trump administration officials of, quote, manufacturing the very chaos they decry. It's one of many immigration-related cases the Supreme Court has been asked to weigh in on. And several times the court has insisted the president both has the right to deport illegal immigrants, but also that those immigrants have a right to due process before they're deported. Those deportations have been the subject of protests around the country, including this one Monday in Tennessee.
I'm married to an immigrant who's working on his citizenship, and it's been a very hard time recently because I don't know if he's ever going to come home when he goes to work.
Nashville's Mayor Freddie O'Connell now facing blowback after ordering city employees to report all communications with ICE, following a recent operation in which nearly 200 illegal immigrants were arrested.
The Homeland Security and the Judiciary Committees will be conducting an investigation into the mayor of Nashville, his conduct, and whether or not federal dollars have been used in criminal enterprise.
Brewing battles over immigration now a daily occurrence in communities across the country as the tug of war between the Trump administration and the courts plays out. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
Elon Musk's time with the federal government is done. He is officially stepping down from DOGE after wrapping up work advising the federal government to cut wasteful spending. As a special government employee, Musk was limited to 130 days in service. Wednesday, he thanked President Trump for the opportunity to help root out government overspending, corruption, and fraud, saying in part, the DOGE mission will only strengthen over time as it becomes a way of life throughout the government. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are set to consider a DOGE package as early as next week. The package includes $9.4 billion in spending cuts that would eliminate federal funding to NPR, PBS, and the U.S. Agency for International Development. And speaking of, a legal battle is brewing over the future of NPR and PBS in the U.S. The NPR filing a First Amendment lawsuit after the Trump administration stripped its federal funding. The White House said federal taxpayer dollars should not fund networks that are biased after accusing them of only promoting left-wing ideology and stories. The Supreme Court will not hear the case of a Massachusetts student whose middle school banned him from wearing a shirt that said there are only two genders. All justices declined to hear the case except Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. In his dissent, Justice Alito wrote, "This case presents an issue of great importance to our nation's youth, whether public schools may suppress student speech either because it expresses a viewpoint that the school disfavors or because of vague concerns about the likely effect of the speech on the school atmosphere or on students who find the speech offensive." It will be a busy couple of weeks for the Supreme Court with several landmark opinions due by the end of June. More than half of the cases the court has heard arguments on are still pending. And that includes the constitutionality of states banning irreversible gender transition surgery for minors, expanding religious rights, and birthright citizenship. Developing now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Make America Healthy Again report is facing scrutiny. According to the health secretary, the document is based on gold standard science. However, the news site Notice reports at least 7 of the sources cited in its pages do not exist. The outline says it reached out to multiple listed authors who said that they did not write the studies cited. Others said their research was misinterpreted. The White House says it has complete confidence in Secretary Kennedy and his team.
I understand there were some formatting issues with the MAHA report that are being addressed, and the report will be updated, but it does not negate the substance of the report, which, as you know, is one of the most transformative health reports that has ever been released by the federal government.
And Levitt adds she cannot speak to whether artificial intelligence was used to assemble the report, deferring the question to the Department of Health and Human Services. Health officials are warning about a new strain of COVID from China that has led to a spike in hospitalizations across the U.S. This variant was first detected in the U.S. back in late March among international travelers at airports on the West Coast. Over the past couple of months, it has become the dominant strain across Asia, and COVID hospitalizations have more than doubled in mainland China over the past month. Cases have already been reported in California, Washington State, Virginia, New York, Ohio, Rhode Island, and Hawaii. Meantime, the CDC has officially updated its immunization schedule for COVID vaccines. The agency is no longer recommending the vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women.
Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
There's no evidence healthy kids need it today, and most countries have stopped recommending it for children.
We're now one step closer to realizing President Trump's promise to make America healthy again.
And more doctors are also coming out against Biden-era COVID and hospital policies. The National News Desk, Christine Frizzau, sat down with one doctor who says most U.S. hospitals got it wrong, and their mistakes may have been deadly.
The scenes coming from inside hospitals in the early days of the pandemic were horrifying and heartbreaking. Patients diagnosed with a brand new virus put on ventilators, often forced to say goodbye to loved ones on electronic devices.
We literally watched my dad take his last breath on an iPad.
So it was pretty obvious in the spring and summer of 2020 that we weren't really dealing with a respiratory infection. It was actually a vascular disease of the lungs, and that's one of the reasons if you have a vascular issue of the lungs, the worst thing you can do is increase the intrathoracic pressure, which is what ventilation does, and in a sense is why most people that got on the ventilator did not live.
In fact, studies in the early days of the pandemic had similar findings. In New York's largest hospital system, many patients on ventilators didn't make it. Those ventilators also soon led to a resurgence in ventilator-associated pneumonia, or VAP, which dates back decades. One study looking at patients with VAP found the presence of COVID-19 was associated with a longer duration of mechanical ventilation and a higher risk of death.
I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that the ventilator actually could have contributed to people dying. Is that right?
100%. Yeah, it's actually, if you think about the vessels, if you already have vessels that don't work very well, what's the worst thing you can do to them? Actually blow more air in them, increase the intrathoracic pressure, and actually close down more vessels and actually make the oxygenation worse.
Still, other more recent studies have shown those with COVID on ventilators compared with those on ventilators for other reasons had similar mortality rates. Ventilators, after all, are usually reserved for those who are already very sick.
I'm Christine Frizzau reporting.
Coming up, a pretty penny, no more. The government cutting production to save money. How much the Treasury expects to save and what drove up the cost to make pennies. The U.S. Treasury just placed its final order for penny blanks earlier this month. Once those run out, that's it. No more pennies. Our fact-check team's Janae Bowens joining us now. End of an era. So how much money are we talking about here in savings?
Yeah, Dee. So the Treasury says we're looking at an immediate annual savings of around $56 million. Now, you might remember back in February, President Trump announced a decision to stop production, saying it just doesn't make sense anymore because it costs nearly 4 cents to make 1 penny.
I know, and I'm sure that the bulk of these costs has to do with materials, correct?
Exactly. So a big part of it comes down to materials. According to Jay & Bullion, most pennies are made from zinc, and zinc just isn't as cheap as it used to be. Now, prices went up in 2024 due to a tighter supply, so it's become more expensive to keep minting these coins. And get this, critics say nickels are even worse. They cost almost 14 cents each to produce.
All right, we'll see if that's next. I can't remember the last time I carried a penny. I doubt anyone's going to miss them. Janae, thank you. And Janae, we'll be back in just a few minutes with what saying goodbye to the penny could actually mean for your wallet. Coming up on the National News Desk, playing with fire. President Trump pushing for peace as Russia now proposes a second round of negotiations to end the war with Ukraine. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis discusses the very latest. Just days after Russia launched its largest aerial attack on Ukraine, Russia's foreign minister is now proposing a second round of peace talks on Monday in Istanbul. Joining Jen Jeffco to discuss the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine war is retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis.
What do you make of this now with Moscow proposing this second round of talks after its deadly assault over the weekend?
Yeah, it's mostly optics. The Russians aren't changing their approach necessarily. They are, however, shaping international perceptions, and they're managing their diplomatic pressure around the world. Clearly, the President Trump, has made it very clear that Putin's playing with fire, and so they had to do something. So I think it's just, like I say, it's optics.
So basically, we're not going to see concessions necessarily from Russia, but they're going to continue down this road of negotiations and attacks.
Yeah, it's a dual effort. They're going to have the on-the-ground tactical engagements, but at the same time, they're going to talk behind the scenes. We've seen this historically in other wartime situations, so this is pretty typical of certainly Putin.
President Trump, as you mentioned, he called Putin crazy, posted he's playing with fire, but he also said this. He said, likewise, President Zelensky is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it, and it better stop. This is a war that would have never started if I were president. This is Zelensky's, Putin's, and Biden's war, not Trump's. I am only helping to put out the big and ugly fires that have been started through gross incompetence and hatred. Lieutenant Colonel, some lawmakers believe we should support Ukraine in its fight for sovereignty and democracy against Russian aggression. But there's an enormous economic cost to help Ukraine with military aid, with intelligence, and there's still no guarantee that the end result would even be achieved. So what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt, Jan, we have a growing divide in Washington over this. Yes, Mr. Trump wants to present himself as the peacemaker, and I think that's well received in this particular country. But the lack of an end game with Zelensky, we saw a fiasco in the White House months ago when, Trump told Zelensky, you don't have any cards, which is true. He doesn't have any to play against Putin. So we've got to figure out our national interest, and we have to ask a series of questions because the country's becoming fatigued with what's going on in Ukraine. And we just are not going to continue to fund something unless they tell us where it's going to end.
Exactly. Americans are done funding this war. I read Zelensky's asking for another $30 billion for domestic arms. How would you then advise the president?
Yeah, yes, we are concerned about Europe and its security, but there must be accountability. There has to be a shared burden. We just aren't going to continue to pour good money after bad. It's time for Europe to step up. Europe needs to, recognize this war is in its backyard. It has more responsibility than we do on this side of the Atlantic. So there has to be a repayment program. And at the same time, we need to send a very clear message that we aren't going to abandon our friends because the Chinese are watching carefully, as are the Iranians. And so it's a dual message here. We'll help, but we're not going to continue to be in charge of larding the battlefield. After all it's seemingly to do is to frustrate the Americans when we have battle fatigue on our minds.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, fighting anti-Semitism, the federal probe into a California university over allegations of harassment, exclusion, and abuse of Jewish students. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. In Austin, Texas, flyers are adjusting to new baggage policies. And in Florida, police say a suspect opened fire on a golf course.
You would hear gunshots. It was like pop, 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 pop.
A terrifying Tuesday for several Jupiter residents. Shots ringing out at the Abacoa Golf Club near Parkside and Barbados Drive. Patrick O'Donnell lives in the area and says he was at the park around 6 p.m. when he heard the gunfire.
The other dad dismissed it and he thought it was just a motorcycle that was driving by, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that was a gunshot.
According to the Jupiter Police Department, 3 golfers say a man with a handgun was out back on a patio, firing at them from a home. The trio ran for safety and immediately dialed 911.
We saw officers draw their weapons, automated weapons, and some guys had riot shields, and the dogs were out, trying to get the bad guy out there. So it was something that you don't see every day, especially in Abacoa.
Jewish students at Cal Poly Humboldt have been threatened, targeted, harassed, assaulted, discriminated against,
continuously in an escalating pattern that has gotten continuously more intense, vicious, and severe.
Now the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has officially opened an investigation. A statement was released by leaders at Cal Poly Humboldt stating in part, quote, "We are working closely with the California State University to respond to OCR's investigation and ensure that we are compliant with all federal requirements." Both Pick and Zach Mink, the student mentioned in the complaint, claim they haven't seen much progress from the university. In fact, they say more students have come forward with more incidents.
The dean of the library allowing for terrorist propaganda booklets published by designated terrorist organizations to be in glass cases, right? It's not just students came in and put them onto a table. They had to be approved and they had to be placed.
Checking one bag at Southwest Airlines now costs $35. A second checked bag will cost $45. The new fees are testing the loyalty of some frequent flyers like this college student.
I can bring everything with me at a lower fare, so, it just makes everything easier. But right now, it's not. Yeah.
Right now, you might shop around.
Oh, literally.
The airline predicts the fees could generate $1.5 billion a year in revenue, but it could also lose up to $1.8 billion from loyal customers who primarily flew on Southwest because of its unique baggage policy. Assigned seating is another big change that will take effect later this year.
Sometimes it gets a little anxious getting on the plane and lining up before to get to the correct seat.
So you might like assigned seats more.
Yes, correct.
Still to come here, settlement reached.
I think it's fair for both parties.
A Maryland high school student reaches a settlement with his school district following his suspension for voicing concerns about the lack of American flags in classrooms. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News. Now, you can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. Flag fight. We'll hear from the Baltimore student who challenged his school system and won. Plus, pulling the plug. More Democrats reversing course as they join Republicans to stop the Biden-era electric vehicle mandate. And after 230 years of production, the government tosses out its pennies. How the change could impact pricing. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin with the Maryland student and prospective U.S. Marine who was suspended while asking why classrooms in his high school did not contain American flags. After speaking with our reporters, he sued Baltimore County Public Schools, and now, as our Chris Pastor explains, that lawsuit has been settled.
I just got the French cuffs on the side.
Senior prom 2025.
Boy, we could have matched.
Yeah, I wish. An experienced Towson High School senior Parker Jensen thought he would miss.
Very excited to be here.
This is actually cute.
Yeah.
As far as going to prom, how important was that for you?
Very important. You only get one.
It was just last month when Project Baltimore broke the news that Jensen, a Marine hopeful, was suspended from school for 7 days after he went to the Baltimore County Public Schools headquarters.
Hi, can I help you?
Hi, how are you doing? To ask why some classrooms at Towson High School were missing American flags. According to state law and BCPS board policy, all classrooms must contain the flag.
3 cop cars for a kid.
As a result of that suspension, Jensen was barred from attending his prom and his own high school graduation.
You're actually suspended from the school. He's to be with this and without this.
But after Project Baltimore first interviewed Jensen, he hired an attorney and sued BCPS, claiming the district violated his constitutional rights by suspending him without cause. And now, just weeks later, Jensen and Baltimore County Public Schools say they have reached a settlement agreement.
Yep.
That was fast.
Yeah.
Settlements don't usually happen in weeks.
Yeah.
Jensen told us, as part of the agreement, he cannot disclose the monetary amount he received. BCPS also asked him to sign a non-disparagement agreement, prohibiting him from saying anything negative about the school system for 2 years.
I'm assuming you're happy with the settlement amount?
Yeah, no, I'm very happy, and I think it's fair for both parties as well.
Fight for the flag, a Baltimore student challenging his school system.
The last few weeks have been a whirlwind for this 18-year-old.
I think it is a cause worth fighting for.
After Project Baltimore told his story, it went viral with national news outlets such as Fox News and the New York Post picking it up. Just this post on the social media platform X got 1.3 million views.
Did you expect that?
No, honestly, no. I thought that it would be our interview and then it would just be local people. It's definitely added a lot of craziness. More good than bad, I'd say.
With all the attention, Jensen says he's heard from friends and family offering support. Maryland State Delegate Stuart Schmidt honored Jensen with this official citation from the Maryland General Assembly thanking him for his patriotism. On June 27th, he'll receive the Young Patriot of the Year award from the Baltimore City Republican Party.
It's been really crazy.
Jensen was even contacted by current and former U.S. Marines, who he did not previously know.
It's been very uplifting to know that, I have support from people in the armed forces.
But Jensen's story isn't quite over because someone at district headquarters made a decision to suspend him. And that decision cost you, the taxpayers, money. Again, we don't know how much money. Jensen can't tell us. But has anyone at BCPS been held accountable? The school system is constantly saying it doesn't have enough money.
More than 7,000 students will graduate from BCPS this spring.
At a recent press event, we asked Superintendent Dr. Miriam Rogers if anyone has been held to account.
The school system cannot make a comment. The only comment I can make is that the matter has been resolved amongst both parties.
But has anyone been held accountable is what I'm asking.
I wouldn't be able to comment further on personnel matters or other details.
I mean, it's just a yes or no. Has someone been held accountable?
We're going to go back here. Thank you.
3.
Okay, that's Okay, thanks so much.
Bubba. I didn't even realize.
So that's probably why he's wearing it, to be a little more patriotic.
Exactly.
In August, Jensen reports for Marine Boot Camp.
The whole reason I went into this was about the flag. Felt like it was kind of a staple to wear today because this is like a special night.
There you go. Oh,
It's
that's
good.
cute.
Yeah.
A night that marks the end of a journey.
It should be a fun night.
That almost didn't happen.
It's the end of the first chapter. So definitely gonna see more of me somewhere.
New details now. The EV push has been short-circuited by Congress with some unexpected help. California is scrambling to file a lawsuit after lawmakers blocked their plan to ban the sale of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. Now, this wasn't just a Republican win. 35 Democrats in the U.S. House voted to kill the mandate. Former Trump White House economic advisor Steve Moore points out it was never a smooth road for the landmark plan.
Hybrids are very popular, but this law wouldn't have even allowed hybrids. You would have had to have a full EV. Only about 8% of the cars on the road today are EVs today. So that would have been a big problem, getting all Americans to switch cars.
Nearly a dozen states were set to follow California's lead, which is about 40% of the U.S. auto market. And the Trump administration is fighting a ruling that temporarily stops its efforts to ban Harvard from enrolling international students. The White House gave Harvard 30 days to respond to its demand. The administration argues that Harvard has a history of fostering violence and promoting ideas that align with terrorist organizations and the Chinese Communist Party. A health alert now. Many parents and caregivers, they don't know the warning signs that a teenager is in digital distress. That's according to a new study. The term refers to the stress or the emotional toll that can come with the excessive use of technologies like smartphones or social media. According to experts at El Camino Health Hospital in California, signs can include irregular sleep patterns or behaviors like isolation and aggression. Cybersecurity experts are warning travelers that hackers are targeting free public Wi-Fi in airports, hotels, and cafes, putting sensitive data at risk. Some well-known techniques include fake Wi-Fi networks, and once you connect to them, they can monitor your activities or redirect you to malicious sites.
A Wi-Fi network that looks like the real legitimate one, but it's actually run by somebody who could be very nearby, trying deliberately to intercept your data. Passwords, logins, they could even hack into your computer.
To keep your information safe, experts recommend to use your own hotspot or use a VPN to create a secure tunnel between websites and devices. Big news, the penny officially on its way out. The Treasury says phasing it out should save the country about $56 million a year. The fact check team's Janae Bowens is joining us. Wow, that's very significant. Does this mean that we're about to see prices change?
That could be the case, but not in a major way. Coinage magazine had a great example. Now, retailers could start rounding prices to the nearest nickel instead of the nearest penny. So instead of seeing something for $9.99, it might be $9.95, but it could go the other way. If something costs $10.06, it could be rounded up to $10.10. Now, some experts say that might make people feel like prices are going up. And if that happens, voters could start pointing fingers at political leaders. So we'll see if Americans start paying more attention to their change.
More people aren't even visiting physical banks, let alone using cash with your phone, nearby. Do we have figures on that?
Yeah. So according to the Federal Reserve's 2024 payment study, only 16% of transactions are made with cash. So credit and debit cards are way more common now. They actually rank first and second. And according to the New York Times, there are an estimated 240 billion pennies just lying around the U.S. That breaks down to about 724 pennies for every person in the country. That's a lot of loose change.
Yeah, exactly. They're just discarded pretty much. Janae, thank you. For more on this fact check team topic, including links to their sources, scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. And coming up next here, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the conflicting court rulings on Trump's trade policies to ICE's ramped up deportation efforts.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The future of President Trump's tariffs in question for now after a federal court ruling that he doesn't have the authority to impose them. National correspondent Audra El-Nashar, you've been covering Trump's tariff policy very closely the past few months. What's next legally, and what are the possible economic impacts of the court's ruling?
Yeah, Steve, we have been so focused on the economic uncertainty of these tariffs, and now it's all about the legal uncertainty. So let's go in chronological order of what happened here. So the president has been leaning on this 1977 Emergency Economic Powers Law to bypass Congress and impose these sweeping double-digit tariffs on trading partners across the globe. Earlier this week, 2 federal courts said, you don't have the power to do that. You're stretching the bounds of this law a bit too much. Then an appeals court stepped in and said, while this plays out in court, your tariffs can continue. So the White House says they're prepared to fight this all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's probably going to happen, frankly. What happens in the meantime is anybody's guess. I'm certainly not going to look into any crystal balls here. But take a listen to each side. First, you're going to hear from a lawyer representing 5 companies suing the administration, and then you're going to hear from the White House press secretary.
Obviously, the Constitution gives the power to tariff to Congress, not to the president. He can't just assert unlimited authority to tariff whenever he wants.
America cannot function if President Trump, or any other president for that matter, has their sensitive diplomatic or trade negotiations railroaded by activist judges.
So the president's arguing it's a national emergency that grants him this unilateral authority. The lower court said there is no emergency. So really that's the core question here. And I should note that this does not apply to double-digit tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos, which are really hitting Canada, Mexico, and China. So TBD, but like many things in this administration, it is likely going to end up in the Supreme Court.
Yep, we'll be watching the Supreme Court for yet another aggressive Trump policy proposal or action that they'll have to weigh in on. Audra, thank you. Meanwhile, President Trump's migrant deportation efforts appear to be kicking into a higher gear. National correspondent Christine Frizzell, what's the latest, and what are critics of the deportation saying?
Yeah, kind of a loaded question there, Steve. But the bottom line is, remember, when President Trump came into office, he promised to deport 15 million people. That's how many people he thought came in during the last 4 years under the Biden administration's more lax immigration policies. Well, they are going after people. We're seeing video after video. Different ICE agencies around the country will post these pictures and video of targeted enforcement operations in which they say they're focusing mostly on criminals. And they have arrested, confirmed gang members. They've arrested convicted murderers and sex offenders. But there's a lot of other people getting sort of swept up in this. They're also going after other people, showing up at immigration courts where people are having their hearings. Just last week, we saw a high school student in New York City arrested at his, at the courthouse. We saw the visa of a 4-year-old revoked. She was getting life-saving medical treatment. So as you can imagine, there are some mixed reactions. The Trump administration, they're not satisfied with how fast this is moving. In fact, last week, we learned that top officials, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, as well as top aide Stephen Miller, have ordered ICE officials to start arresting a jaw-dropping 3,000 people a day. They don't really have the money for this, but they're looking for it. They're trying to devote more resources.
Something we'll be watching very closely. Thanks, Christine. Meanwhile, an effort to level the playing field for public school students called equity grading is running into bipartisan resistance across the country. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, tell us what you've learned.
Yeah, Steve, and the term equity in general has really become a contentious, controversial word because a lot of people see it as aiming towards equality of outcomes, which in education, you have a whole spectrum of students getting all kinds of grades. But what this specific proposal in San Francisco, which only was out there for about 24 hours before the city decided to ditch it amid so much backlash. What this proposal had was cutting class, for example, was going to be totally fine. If students failed a test, they would be able to retake the exam again and again to try to get better scores on it. Let's say you forgot to do your homework and didn't bring it to school to turn it in. Well, that wouldn't count against you. An 80% was all you needed to get an A, and a 41% would get you a C. 41% on the traditional scale is failing by a lot. And so this was met with immediate backlash, though, from both sides. We had the mayor of San Francisco come out and say, this is not what's going to be best for the students, the kids of San Francisco. And then Representative Ro Khanna, he's a Democratic congressman from California. His district is actually just south of San Francisco. And he is the child of immigrants. And he said his parents pushed him very hard to do well in school. And that's why he has the success that he has. So he says this also is not helping kids at all. And he said that we're seeing with the reaction from the mayor of San Francisco, with the quick reversal of this, some common sense come back to the Democratic Party, because this equitable grading system is seen as really a progressive darling. And we actually spoke with Ryan Staley. He's a researcher with Parents Defending Education, and he summed up what a lot of critics have to say about this system.
You want to teach kids good habits so that when they become an adult, they can be successful in the adult world. And what equitable grading does is it rewards or incentivizes unsuccessful behaviors.
And Steve, the superintendent of San Francisco School Board, said there's a lot of misinformation. She doesn't think that this was rolled out in a way where people actually understood the program. And there are also plenty of supporters of equitable grading who say this allows kids to actually learn the material and not get bad grades because they say didn't turn in their homework, but they scored really well in exams, that sort of thing. And this comes as American kids still continue to struggle in education with near record low math and reading scores in 8th and 4th grade. So as we sort out how to sort out America's education system, ideas like this are still being tested, still being pulled back, but we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, a lot of this a result of the pandemic, home learning, and the fallout from that, still dealing with it 5 years later. Kayla, Christine, Audra, always, thanks for your hard work. Back to you.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, dog attacks.
The dogs are still running around. It's biting children, attacking people. You can't sit out there in the yard. You can't enjoy yourself out in the yard and having to fight dogs all the time. And I'm just getting tired of it.
A South Carolina community in fear of dogs that are roaming around town. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. And we start in Seattle, Washington, where volunteers are cleaning up a series of homeless encampments. But first, in Arlington, Virginia, police say a repeat traffic offender nearly killed a Virginia officer.
Anthony Acquise is charged with felony hit and run after allegedly hitting an Arlington police officer with his car and driving away. This isn't the first time Acquise has faced charges. In Fairfax County, he was charged with a number of traffic-related incidents in 2022 and 2024, and most were dropped, dismissed, or reduced according to court records.
We are allowing people who are a danger on the road to return to the road.
And it could have cost an officer their life, says Sean Kennedy, the president of Virginians for Safe Communities. Kennedy is also on the Fairfax County Criminal Justice Advisory Board.
Here in Northern Virginia, largely Fairfax County, he has been given a slap on the wrist time after time. First for no license and no registration, then for reckless driving, where he paid a fine that was actually lesser than what he would have gotten if it were just a speed ticket.
Last October, Aquise was charged in Fairfax County with speeding 20 miles per hour or more above the speed limit, or driving over 85 miles per hour. But the misdemeanor charge was reduced to a traffic infraction.
This suspect gets away with it time and time again, and he almost kills someone. If not for the grace of God, that officer may well be dead because we failed to enforce the laws and impose appropriate penalties.
The dogs are still running around. He's biting children, attacking people.
Judy Taylor says she's taking a chance being outside of her home when there are vicious dogs roaming the streets of McCall. Taylor tells me she encountered 3 of the animals just a few days ago.
And they come running up on the porch. My little dog ran into the house, but the dog got me on the leg.
Brandy Dill says some dogs attacked her 25-year-old son. She shared pictures with me of his injuries.
They ripped his legs up. He had puncture marks everywhere. He had to get rabies shots. And unfortunately, we didn't have animal control.
We need a dog catcher.
McCall Mayor Robert Outlaw says he's worried the next attack or mauling could be deadly.
We've had a month. I think we've had like 9 pretty bad serious calls with dogs. We got a serious dog problem in town.
I don't think it's fair. Not to us anyway. And you can't sit out there in the yard. You can't enjoy yourself out in the yard and having to fight dogs all the time. And I'm just getting tired of it.
It's a colossal catastrophe of a constellation of all bad things out here, and by cleaning it up, we restore safety.
The trails that meander through Seattle's Kinnear Park and the undeveloped western side of Queen Anne have been longtime hotbeds for homeless encampments. These volunteers are doing all they can to remove the debris that's been left behind.
We're so much more than cleaning up the trash. We're providing a way to build community through action. Fill the gaps!
Andrea Suarez with We Heart Seattle issued a call to action and enlisted help from many of the same people who used to camp in these woods themselves until they were shown another path.
And now I get a chance to give back, come back to the very same place that we were before, and I can kind of just give back a little bit. It's kind of like full circle.
The Memorial Day volunteers included social workers, business people, and even a candidate for Seattle mayor.
The thing I like about these guys is they get people off the streets, they get them into treatment, and that's how people recover and become not homeless.
Still ahead here on the National News Desk, finding healing on horseback. Some veterans turning to a different kind of therapy after bravely serving our country. The New York Times announced a licensing deal where their content will train Amazon AI models. The multi-year agreement allows services like Alexa to use content from The Times. The deal expands on a previous agreement where the New York Times copy was available on Amazon's offerings. Several other news publishers like the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and Axios have licensing deals with AI companies. And in Loudoun County, Virginia, a horse farm is giving veterans a new therapy option. Loudoun Therapeutic Riding is a 90-acre farm that offers riding lessons and other programs for vets and their families. The goal is to help expand care for military members and better their mental health. Some veterans say it's a lifesaver.
I don't remember a lot of stuff, but I do remember the feeling I get when I'm with them, and that helps carry me through. I started having a hard time at home, stopped doing anything, actually didn't even turn on the light.
The Department of Veterans Affairs estimates 18 vets die by suicide every day. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check our local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.